Shall we wait for Elio or not? Okay, let's move on then. So we're going to start with the introductions here. We're going to introduce two people from the company here, so we know each other already. I'm Rui Cunha. I'm here currently in Leixões in the direction of port operations and safety. I come from the sea. I've been in long-short ships for several years and in container ships as well. I've been working as a pilot as well. I've been here for 12 years in port administration, not really in this position, but this is quite a recent promotion. But my perspective here is to tell you that I'm not a trainer and I'm not a teacher. I have 40 years connected to the sea industry and the port industries, and so I have this experience to share with you. We're going to try here. Well, if you want to interrupt me during the presentation, please do. I have lots of slides to show you, but if you want to interrupt, please do. And do not hesitate in commenting. These trainings are generally most oriented to our partners in the port. Sometimes I have a language that is a little bit more technical. Do not let me move along without understanding what I'm saying, because sometimes terminology can make the whole difference. The general objectives of the training, you probably read them already. Today we are going to focus on what is a general vision of the logistic of the supply chain, and we're going to speak a little further of the logistics of the port here. So this is where I have some experience and where I can share with you and add some value to this time we're going to spend here today. So I focused more in the management of operations regarding maritime transport in our port. As you know, it's a node of the supply chain as well. The contents that have to be developed here, of course, here we have to be able to identify and characterize the key variables of the supply chain, always focusing on the port. The 2 points I was asked to develop with you. So we have here a first bit that is to speak about the PSW, the port single window, and also understand the LSW, the logistics single window, and understand here some differences. And to begin the conversation, I can tell you that I have lots of colleagues connected to this, associated with it, to partners, and that established LSW with us, and we have to make sure that each of us establishes the great difference between the PSW and the LSW. Then finally, we make an approach of the port logistic operations, what the port services are. We need a greater time than what we have to speak about them, so I'm going to focus mainly on the most important services that are used daily and that are clearly part of intermodality, of the port fluidity, and we're going to see which they are. All of this framed in the European politic for transport and, of course, for maritime transport as well. So I asked this slide to a colleague of us that you know very well, that is our friend Elio here. If nowadays globalization is a common word, it's also very clear that maritime transport, even by its specificity, well, ships, of course, cross the world. They go all over the world, and very quickly they are in a very developed country such as Northern Europe, with the very last technologies and the very last concepts in terms of maritime transport, and as quick as that, they can be on another part of the world where all the processes are very much less developed. So it's one of the 4 pillars of globalization, the part of communication and technologies as well. So all These aspects are related, and they have been valorized with the development of technology. And for you who are younger colleagues, the great evolution in technologies in maritime transport is approximately a decade ago. Well, if I show you a ship from a decade ago, it's difficult to identify it with the ship of nowadays. And so the ship is an integral element of communication and of maritime transport. And it's not been very easy to do it because technological development has a cost, and we have to see if it adds value and if it's valuable. And so we're going to see here in what is the European policy. It's inevitable for you who are from the internet generation. So we have a great news here in 2013. How long have we had cell phones and had digital journals? This kind of journal can give news daily. So a member of the cruise ship crew can still check this journal daily. Well, back then we had to use very expensive technology with satellites and everything, and that was a great cost that was part of the management of the ship. So this evolution of technologies, internet and communications allows this mobility and as well as markets liberalization and elimination of trade borders. And so it helped a lot the communication, and it helped a lot. All of us know what happened with the increase of economies. So for example, in China, with the centers of consumption and of production, all of this leads to a great research and a great evolution in maritime transport. And we're going to try and understand why maritime transport has nowadays one of the main concerns of European policies and worldwide as well, because it is itself part of the production chain. Let's move along. And so 90% of what we consume goes through the sea, goes through the ports, and through this supply chain. Even more important than this 90% is that 62% of the value generally goes by the sea and by the port. So I'd like here to emphasize the importance of maritime transport. Of course, maritime transport is a great solution. It's maybe the only solution for great intercontinental journeys. We'll see why in the next graph. But during the last times, there was a concept that maritime transport can also be a great solution in environmental questions for short distances by presenting itself as a solution that has a good cost, that is viable, and that is able to substitute, for example, trucks on the road. So we're trying to transfer from trucks to maritime transport. And why? Because it is the most economical way to transport. When we divide the cost of ships by the tonnage of the cargo, we can see that it is an economic way to transport, and clearly with less emission per ton and per mile navigated. And nowadays we can see maritime transport as a polluter. There's a lot of ways to control these emissions in the port and in the sea, and there are also measures to reduce these gas emissions. So we can see that the great gain here, if nowadays it's a means with less emissions, with the improvement that we try to do with the change of fuel, we are creating very interesting solutions for our environmental matters. Here we compared the cost by ton per mile regarding air transport and water transport. We also compare the emissions by ton and by mile navigated, and also the passengers transport. So we can see that maritime transport presents itself as a good solution. I, who belong to the ports, defend this solution a lot, of course. And so this transfer in Europe from the cargo, from the truck to maritime transport is a tendency nowadays. What is important right now in European policies is clearly to eliminate the main obstacles that nowadays still exist regarding this transfer, that creates added value and allow the maritime transport to compete with road transport in terms of price, in terms of quality, and in terms of our environmental promises. For Europe, maritime transport has been a catalyzer of the economy itself, and it's been clearly a prosperity factor throughout the years and throughout the history. So if there is some doubt about the maritime transport industry seen as a whole and everything that is associated to it, we can see that employment and incomes for the European economy, for the whole world as well, but here we're focusing more on the European economy. Europe, Asia, of course, 50% of the cargo all around the world. So we have next America, and then Europe with 20 to 22% of the total cargo transported in seaborne trade. That is by waterways. These concerns to make maritime transport integrated in supply chains and turn it into a solution to substitute road transport has been bringing during the last years a focus and a particular concern in the Parliament and in the Commission. So it's not our theme nowadays. I'm just going to leave you a map of what are the very important points and very important milestones. I'd like you to see some differences here. 14 years ago, in 2001, the focus was on the time to decide. So we had to make transport more efficient and effective. So we mentioned here the environmental concerns as well. So 14, 15 years ago, the main focus was the time to make great decisions. 5 years later, in 2006, we had a European vision for the oceans and the seas. So that's a holistic approach that meant that here we were looking at the sea and at the maritime industry in a way that is integrated and global, a bit holistic. Not look at maritime transport only, but also to fishing, to entertainment, to the industry as a whole, and to create an integration policy of the whole industry connected to seas and oceans. Alternative energies, renewable energies, everything that was connected to the sea. The White Book had an intercolor vision regarding the concerns that were seen in 2001, and this vision starts speaking about a maritime transport without barriers. But here focusing mainly on intra-community ports transport. And here we see concepts such as sea highways, to see the origin and the destination point of the sea and create this segment with fluidity in the chain from port to port, and of course with a focus on navigation and sea, but of course creating as well connections for other means, for the traffic of the cargo to be fluid and to and to be successful. And this concept of sea highway is linked to other means of transport. If we take a truck here in Leixões and trying to deliver furniture, we deliver the furniture in other countries without concern. So a ship that lives here to go to Aveiro has exactly the same formalities as a ship that made an intercontinental journey, same paper, same cargo obligations, and so there was a great disparity and inequality between what is maritime transport and the treatment in an economic space of road transport. And so in a first approach, the main concerns were focused on intra-communitary transport. Then in 2009, we had the EU Maritime Transport until 2018, where we strengthened the competitiveness and we want to improve maritime transport. We start speaking not only about transport in a global way, but clearly in maritime transport. So we have here policies just for maritime transport, and in the horizon for 2018 to strengthen competitiveness, improve the environmental performance, and to increase the safety aboard the ships and maritime transport. And why? Because during the whole chain, security is nowadays shared in the whole chain. We have port safety, but we can take a container that came from another forwarder that was consolidated in another place, that was transported by a train or a truck, and that came to us. So we try to have this safety concern throughout the chain for it to be shared by all the actors of the chain. In 2009, also appears the Maritime Transport Without Barriers, and there's a plan to implement some measures, and this plan is a set that is trying to create this approximation and this easiness of maritime transport compared to road transport, first in the European space, making administrative procedures much easier and making maritime transport more attractive and creating a factor of economic development. And an action plan is then communicated, and we'll come back to that a bit later on. And then we have here several documents that reinforce all that spirit. And in this last document in 2013, we have here an economic space, and we speak of blue belts in which goods can circulate among ports, and ensuring these simpler procedures that's as easy as loading a truck and taking it to the destination only with the receipt or the invoice. So if this industry is as global as it is, it's because lots of ships are going to reach Europe coming from other countries where the development in terms of technologies of information is not as good as ours. And here we speak about allowing vessels to operate freely in the EU single market, but we also think about some simplification and harmonization measures for maritime transport from third country ports. So it's not the day to approach this theme, but we have the question of the regular chain seen by customs, and we're trying to accompany a simpler procedure with the participation of customs, but we want from third countries port a treatment that can be simplified and to create some harmonization and regularity. I just wanted to tell you with these important milestones that the focus on maritime transport is something relatively recent given the history of maritime transport. I chose here this one because it gives room for what people ask me to talk about today, that is the port node. And for us, ports, what interests me is the action plan. Policies are being discussed, and of course we accompany them and try to implement them, but this is what interests me. And to put the hands on the job, basically here we have to understand some concepts. Why do some things happen? Why does some ships go through great changes in terms of technology? We speak about the concepts, about the equipment, and we speak about a whole policy, a whole concept that is going to try and implement these policies. And so I chose the action plan for us to examine some of its objectives. The European transport without barriers and the simplification of administrative procedures. Here we're trying to reach the PSW with a clear way to simplify and relate these several actors within the port. The first concept is all this framing, the e-maritime, the e-customs, e-freight. Of course, if we're speaking about business platforms where there is behind it systems of information that are structured and formalized and that allow us some gains in terms of time, in terms of cost, and in terms of productivity. So I just highlighted some points here for us to close on the concept of e-maritime. Here we've been hearing about the simplification of customs procedures. So customs are always a very important pole because we know that since always, if we look at the port, for example, and in most ports, the greater building, the building that catches our eye is automatically the customs building because they have to represent. It's a very important question, and it ensures our commercial trades. So simplify the customs procedure for vessels only sailing between EU ports. And we also mention electronic customs, the concept of PSW and before it, the customs single window. So there's already a relationship between customs in an electronic way before there was this integration with the port. Some modernization measures that try to reduce and to simplify the administrative procedures and documentation related to the cargo, and the challenge to install electronic systems that are secure, that are integrated, and that can be interoperable. And the experience of l'échange might be a unique experience in Europe where this integration does exist and is full. So we only work in one platform. And very important as well is this directive, and the colleagues that are connected to the ports must know it by heart, I believe. It's the only document that structures what are the relationships, the electronic relationships, and that ensure the implementation and the simplification of these formalities in the ports. This directive that began in 2002 has come a long way, and we have some demands here for 2015, and we are currently far from concluding this implementation. So we can see that if we ask you what difficulties might be in the way, we have we are in a decade of discussions, and even today we're not managing to fulfill these deadlines because each port has a lot of partners, each port has its own system. You know, when you want to go on vacations, you sit in front of your computer and you choose the cheapest flight or with less connections in a platform. And if you go to Japan, you sit in another computer and you can make some changes to your journey. So this easiness of intercommunication does not exist in ports. So we've come a long way, but this is still a goal to have a cooperative platform that might connect and that might allow an interoperation among We see then a great advance besides simplification of administrative formalities. We see an improvement in the European space for third countries. So we have concerns that focus in e-maritime on safety questions, on the safety net, on video vigilance systems in the ships, a greater accessibility in the port, and we will see a bit further that this applies both in the journey and in the port. So we try to keep an accompaniment of the traffic and to centralize the information coming from all the ships. And of course, the port single window, trying to implement some national single windows. We're not only going to speak about the PSW here, and here the national single window allows the operators to present information only in one point, and this project is in implementation right now. I'm not sure in which phase it is. It's the ANA project, and it's one more step to say that the ship that enters the first Portuguese port has to present in an electronic way its data, the crew, the passengers. And once this information is given in one point in the country, if the systems are interoperated, the whole country might have access to this information. So we're trying to implement this national single window or this communitary system. And we are trying to go with the directive and implement this point of document delivery.
Very interesting here, dangerous cargo, and some focus here on maritime safety. Dangerous goods have a segregation code for onboard type of cargo that cannot be on board, trying to simplify it without reducing security, but with a clear evaluation of risk of the goods transported in ships, and trying to remove, regarding the terrestrial transport, trying to find some simplification regarding dangerous cargo. And today, most ships, a car that brings fuel, it's a dangerous cargo. All this framework of strategy of policies and resources that we have summarized, that use an integrated maritime transport and logistics chains, and establishing this concept through advanced technologies of communication and information that can permit and to ensure interoperability. It will always be present interoperability in these operations, because if you have no interoperability, all of this makes no sense. If you want to act with our partners to share information, to make it fluid, it is in fact of all these policies, they fail, and clearly objective to look at maritime transport to make it competitive, reducing formalities, administrative costs, and safety without reducing matters of safety, of course, ensuring capacity of monitoring and communication of information on maritime transport. The e-maritime initiative goes is set on technology. These are three strategic objectives of the maritime initiative. One I didn't put here, but it's exactly what we are doing here. It's training to share information, as you had seen on the first slide when you saw globalization. Training is fundamental, sharing. In maritime, the third goal tells us about training, because there is no vocation to the sea. There are not a lot of Europeans. They are leaving the sea, and the ships need crew, because there are experiences of with ships with no crew at all. So 5 years from now, we will see, with a lack of vocation and difficulty, the life on the sea. It's not simple at all. We are away from our social life. So training is one of the goals. E-learning, platform for sharing at a distance to create new will and new aptitudes for the sea. And the other goal, it's clearly the one that I told you before, safety and protection. Please notice that these two concepts, safety in Portuguese, and everything is within security. Safety and security in English are two different areas. Safety has to do with the safety of the ship, control and fighting pollution, and safety is connected with the usage of the ship on the port for traffic of illegal um, uh, weapons. And this had a special boom with the 9/11 and the fall of the Twin Towers. But this has to do with the question of protection. So safety and security were translated as safety and security. So the initiative in maritime puts a great focus on the improvement of safety of maritime transport and protecting the environment using integrated and control systems. We were speaking about the integrated equipment, and in the past things were completely inadequate and were not connected with land at all. Systems that have some intelligence that can allow for a permanent surveillance and monitoring of all the traffic of the ship. A truck that departs from here to Germany on roadways, and it has police to check conformities. A ship that goes to the maritime sea, even if it goes to Aveiro, it goes beyond the control of the port, and we don't know what happens up until the next port. So even the customs, in order to accept some liberalization and simplification of processes, wanted to have some control on the trajet. So this permanent surveillance and monitoring of the ship with a reduction of speed, what's it doing? Is it unloading cargo? Is it with a malfunction? So not that many years ago, maybe 15, there were some stations to which the ships would report to land, so they were not to be seen from land. And to implement the concept of e-navigation, to bring to the ship the concept of the integration in the ship with land systems, with stations or databases that are broader, that integrate other national databases in the scope of the EMSA, of the European Agency for Maritime Security that's located in Lisbon. SafetyNet, LRET, these are names for you to, do you know them or not? Our colleague, of course, but okay. Okay. As you know, GPS in our mobile phones, sometimes it uses satellites, Russian satellites. We have the European one that resulted from the implementation of policies and finances. What we intended was the introduction of Galileo in the processes of traffic monitoring processes and disintegration of information sources in order to reduce piracy. In the time of the Corsairs, we heard about pirates, but there is we are going back to piracy again, so we need to be careful with security and safety. Of course, we are concerned about crews in the ship, but we are concerned also with the cargo that goes in the ship and it has the value chain of the supply chain, and we need to make sure it gets to its destination. Galileo and this is just to give you an idea, some basic knowledge. These are satellites guided for positioning, and this was an advent. I'm from the time of the Magnavox and the devices to navigate manually. Every second we have satellites that gives us the position of the ship and where we can flow information to land. And then the geostationary satellites connected with communications. These are two different concepts, but that I've been allowing the implementation of e-navigation. This is that aboard we have systems of information as there exist in land that have all the information on board of route, of speed, of the way, of the position at each moment. The electronic logbook that either you want it or not, it will record the trajectory, the black boxes with communications on board, similar as the black boxes of the plane. So this is, in 5 years, this is a common language. We are speaking about other areas of transport. In the maritime transport, we are in the advent of these questions. And to allow the interoperability of systems on land to ensure that berth to berth we can ensure safety and security and the protection of the marine environment. The navigation, this is the point of the ship that 5-6 years ago many of them are like this, and today the bridges of the ships are like this. We look at them as, even for those who don't know how they are, it's an integration of all the information of the ship. Today the Platinum system version 5, as the passenger ships have, it's a software. These are information systems that integrate all the information from consumptions to the rotation of the machines with communications. And today, if you want, if you will, online, a German guy can say that my ship has a consumption of a certain quantity, and this means that maybe the captain is full throttle to get the cargo before the weekend to the destiny. And now we are speaking about information systems. ECDIS is an information system with electronic charts where you also have available all the information that can be integrated with land systems. The AIS as an automatic identification system. All these apparatus and equipment are part of the maritime. They are part of the debate of the communication in Europe, of integration under IMO and SALASH of this equipment to make them mandatory on board in order that the ship is identifiable at every time. The automatic identification system, for those who are not familiar with it, it's a system that allows the automatic identification of the ship. It allows through this communication today also to transmit before the arrival of the ship the manifest of dangerous cargo. It allows more than the positioning of the ship at each moment and the knowledge of its position. It allows also the share of messages. And as you see, they are part of a directive integrated in what are the policies for maritime transport. The system was limited because the range of 20-30 miles, because it's for VHF communications. When the ship is beyond the coast, you lose the trail. We used to take for telex and for radio, a position at noon, another position at 1 o'clock. And as you saw today, as you saw before, we had an LRIT that I will present next. I don't know if you saw any system. I will show you. This is there are a lot of free systems. It is available here. This is online. If you were to observe above the ground, you see the planes that are on the air and the ships that you have on the coast. When you look at navigation, you see that we have a ship arriving, but we have on the coast and on the routes a great concentration of navigation. So this is made at the moment. We will not lose any time. You can consult through the site, but we can, by clicking on any ship, to get to know the ship, the last route, the dynamic information, the speed. So this is easily viewable from land in stations, as for example our VTS. It's asking me for a user, so just to tell you that we will see the single port window. This is the info system of APDL. If you go to our room of planning, and we will see some images of it. Today, what we are doing, planning, it's going online in real time, so you can go online to this map and to get to know what's the situation of the port. I think that it didn't load completely. Okay, if you go to the port and click on the ship, you have the characteristics of the ship, but more important than that is to be able to, for example, go to our online information and get to know that list of ships that are at the port, the ships in the approximation area. It's very easy to click on the ship and the client gets to know that an agent that needs to plan the ship knows. This is not news, but these tools are as easy as you see them now. Although it doesn't seem important, but it is interesting for us to play and see the ships. There are partners to whom this information is precious because at each moment they are accompanying, managing delays, changing hours to park the ship, not to have additional costs. So these are interactive tools, professional tools that generate cost reduction. We can click above another ship, Pioneer, for example. I know it's in position A. If you click here, you will have the ship that is here. If you want to know what hours it came in or what hours it will exit, we are planning and we are immediately publishing online in order that our clients can have the professional use that they need. As I told you, if you want to stop me and ask something, please do. The AS system has the limitations of monitoring the ship, and then we will see from the cargo up to 30 miles. And we have created a long-range identification and tracking, which is for long distance to accompany the ship on its intercontinental crossings. The EU6, the European Union fuselage made it mandatory to install identification devices on ships. There are accompanying centers in Europe and monitoring centers where you have all the info of the ships that are navigating at that time. So it allows the permanent identification of the vessel, either if it is near the coast or if it is crossing continents. As I told you before, the VTS system of the port, this integration and interoperability on the land, on the sea, from the navigation, but also from the port of the coastal VTSs. If you want to make it simple, all of us know the stations of the control tower of airports. If you want to make the language more simple, you have a control at ports, ensuring that free flow of traffic when they are getting close to the port, and the IS systems interacting directly with the ship when it gets closer. It is identified immediately between equipment and sending to our systems info of the vessels from the dynamic information of the movement, but the information that go through the messages. well, but port VTS as a port tool that manages flows, and more important, or as important as that, once they are integrated, there were also some guidance regarding maritime traffic systems throughout the coast. Europe is covered. Spain has north and south, all its coast completely covered, and Portugal is from Finisterre has all its coast covered with radar informations, with a central network of communications allowing for a communication. Many of it is instrumental integrating this information in this national system. The national system, for example, our port of Leixões and its management system, integrating information, receiving and integrating from the VTS, connected to authorities that have responsibilities in the safety of the ship, the maritime rescue, and then connected to a national database of merchant ships, the coastal VTS. It is in fact a system that integrates all this info, and then you have a connection here to the safety net, which is a database as an umbrella of all these systems, of these national systems of sharing between European partner ports. Let's cut that little bit in our system. And safety net, which is my, it's an opening nationally, is the single port windows have information regarding the transport of dangerous goods, because in the port, every time some dangerous cargo is loaded, it is immediately integrated in this European database that makes it available for all the partners. This means that if today those who have access to the platform SafeCNet of Europe can click, it has a ship on the coast, as you saw, a lot of ships are here and that are not in Leixões, but at any time can constitute a risk, because you know the accident that's communicated to us, Prestige, was very far, wanted to come to Spain, to Portugal, but you had a disaster that we saw in Spain without no one managing that issue. Today it's very easy getting into the database. We can make an assessment and know the potential risk that a ship, although it doesn't come to Leixões, but it is around our coast, because we have the perfect knowledge of the cargo that it brings on board. So the safety net is an interactive platform that integrates national systems of traffic control that interact and interoperate with ports and makes it available in an interactive platform with all the ports of Europe. The second great objective of strategy has to do with business competitiveness and efficiency in the transportation industry and logistics. And here, resourcing to innovation and use of ICT, ensuring improved quality of transport services, and ensuring that the performance of all the system as an integrated system of maritime transport, offering the concept of door-to-door services. It's easy to understand. We are speaking about the truck, about the furniture that we want to send, in which the truck picks us up at home. That concept applied to the seats between the 2 points of the ship, but all the rest of the chain that changes from one point to another for the ship to make the crossing on the sea and delivering at the door also. And here, in order for this to happen, we need platforms that make it simple, all these processes, by the number of partners that interact in the transport and ports. And so here, pointing as a strategic goal, the implementation of the national single windows. This is a concept of Jules Laducie ahead from these platforms of business and networks that allow for an integrated management of the fleet, and that starts by the port. So this we have been speaking about a global perspective of the maritime transport coming to the port single unit, one of the knots or the hubs of the chain to interoperate with the other national ports and the other national system with the rest of the interoperability with other systems in other countries. What we have been doing so far, and for 2 days we have been speaking about logistics. Everyone knows how to tell me. The focus of maritime transport was from the terminal, from the departure point to the arrival point at the port. So this was our concern to welcome the ship, to put the cargo in a terminal. We're expecting to dispatch the load 7, 8, 10 days until the cargo could be picked up. We could have the customs answered. So this means that what has varied from here to here between the departure point and the arrival point. You have been speaking about this concept of door to door. What's lacking before and after our concern? It's not the terminal and the cargo in a warehouse waiting to be picked up. The concept door to door was in fact that maritime transport can be integrated in a chain that goes from the production to the distribution. Maritime transport was a cost from one place to the other. Today, with a new concept, in a short, that intermodality can work and work well, transport was integrated as a process of production. But from port to port, it became a door-to-door process. This means that clearly when are producing, that concern of having stocks because the ship is only arriving in 1 month and then to get the cargo it's 5 more days. Today the logistics chain of distribution have added value to their own production when we know that Zara, for example, has above the vessels the collection of summer and winter coming at these departure points at the same time that they want to put it in the market. But when they want to exchange that piece, those parts of Volkswagen, we say that, well, come here next week on Wednesday, because it is created a seamless chain of transport in which the stock is not needed. On Wednesday, I have a truck arriving with the parts that I need to exchange. When I speak about integrating on a production chain, is that transport is thought today for those who produce. I will produce and I will deliver because at a certain day this will be loaded and will arrive at the destiny. So the maritime transport here is seen as an integration of door-to-door process where we create. And please notice this because it's one of the challenges that we have on the exercises, if you will, of reflection that I will give you at the end. In fact, this interface is very important. It's my work here and my colleagues here ensure that this transfers of the transport code is made seamlessly. And we will see, this is a challenge that I throw to you to understand what you can do in order that this intermodality is a reality, and a reality that it's effective and efficacious. Obviously, infrastructures were created near ports as logistic platforms. This is a logistic platform with 2 hubs that are quite close. But this integration, this intermodality between the transport mean can be made seamlessly created in platforms, not only in a value chain, the cargo in which the car can be customized for the country where there are industries that produce added value. For the maritime sector always has a maritime scope, where in fact in these areas we can create logistic interfaces either for railway or for trucks or other um, means of transport, ensuring that the seamless communication in the hub, including these platforms as logistic hubs, they it's quite far from the port. You've heard of dry port. These are ports where cargo is transferred in order that it's effective and efficient. This logistic hub and these infrastructures who are dedicated to intermodality ensure this clear path. Transport was consumed with these routes. The growth of vessels, this bigger demand for maritime transport, has shown a reorganization of the transport itself. There are huge ships that are not allowed to go to all the ports in the world, and so we were create some transfers in this cargo, make it coming from the departure point to the arrival point, creating routes due to clearly some physical demands from the growth of vessels in some routes. Interequatorial, Evergreen was one of the first companies that started with these routes, and having ports in this way of great concentrators of cargo, obviously, with a logistic platform in the north of the port, and in great areas of concentration of cargo to be distributed by transoceanic ships, either for one point of the globe to the other. Obviously, we are speaking about through Europe, we are speaking about regular crossings of a ship that may certain ports in always the same chain, but as I said before, for management of stocks to know that on Thursday I have a ship here, but our industry or our commerce to know that on Thursday I have a ship here to deliver our products. And there are some arrangements, this pendularity of port to port, that it's symmetric when it has its rotation, because the cargo it's more abundant on one place or the other, to make this with some asymmetry 4 or 5 ports, and then it gets and returns again. So in fact this was reorganized a little bit around either these great intercontinental crossings from the size of the ship, bringing the possibility of some of these ships circulate through all these ports.
The great concentrators of cargo, these ports have greater dimension that sometimes, these are cargoes that come to Lakeshore serve their interland and their industry, but those who go to seams are cargoes that come from the extreme orient and stay there to then be transported. So they don't actually reach land, they're just deposited there to be redistributed. And of course, in this cargo, of course, some of it will be for interland. So this is a reorganization of ports to ensure in some way, in a more micro vision, all this seamlessness. And these ports, such as Port L'échange, that serve their interland import-export, or our platforms of Tranklands where we can do transshipment to other lines. Well, a ship that leaves cargo here in a platform as Alcides can make the transshipment for a ship that might go to the north or the United States or somewhere else. And then feedering is the connection between the hubs and the smaller ports. So this realization is, of course, trying to create in a more macro way this seamlessness. This perspective, of course, has been creating a great challenge to the ports to ensure higher levels of efficiency in navigation between these nodes. Either they are ships, so hubs, transshipment, and all these concepts, but as well to ensure fluidity in the port. And of course, we focus always in the connection between all these means and the accessibility to the information systems. I usually say, and it's my responsibility, that there are 3 competitiveness factors in the port to ensure maritime fluidity, road fluidity, and documentary fluidity. So if we don't have one of them, the port won't work very well. We can have excellent administrative process, but if we don't have great maritime accessibility. The ships were just going to be waiting for hours for streams, for everything. And if we don't have a good performance in entrance and fluidity, well, the ship is just going to wait inside the port. So what we generally say is that the effectiveness of a partner is not the effectiveness of the whole. So this has to work in an integrated way. I usually said that I never made a report in my ship that I didn't make in the port. I always made communications of information when something went wrong. So the image that goes through the port and this competitiveness that goes through this image is ensured by the collective effectiveness of all the partners and not just great asymmetries between the partners that end up compromising the general activity. So the effectiveness of the partners is not systematic. This is we can say that we have something approximately good. We just can't say that. So 3:50, so I started 10 minutes later. I had here time for a little break. I didn't tell you at the beginning, but I generally structure this in 3 moments. This moment, that is to speak about maritime transport. And now we're going to speak a little bit about the port. So in this phase, if you want to ask some questions, if you want to communicate some information. I haven't been talking to our colleagues from Europe yet. I tend to forget this family. I'm sorry, I haven't been talking to you directly, but for us to be here online, we are in an open space. We're just not seeing each other, and I would very much like to hear from you. You may ask questions. I said in the beginning that you have my email there. I want you to keep that email address, and I want you to give me some feedback of how this session went. We have a great will to share information, but also to gather some information from other ports. So we remain open to new ideas, and my email is available for you to exchange information, knowledge as well. With us, even if it's just to say hi, we're here. So I'm going to leave you for a little bit here. It's still a bit early for the coffee break. Is there some questions you might want to ask? Hasn't anyone fallen asleep yet? I'll give you the microphone, but please do not sing fado. Well, regarding the platforms of SafeCNet and the PSW, I never heard about it. Can you tell me if they're independent or if they share information among themselves? I believe that in the case here of Portugal, of Porto Leixões, well, if SafeCNet is a European platform, of course, as we didn't reach the concept of the PSW, of course, we don't have this connection yet, but the European database is directly fed by our PSW. So when I say that our information flows, we literally don't do anything. I'm not going to introduce a manifest. For example, the manifest of dangerous cargo, by being integrated in the port platform, it migrates through messages and conversations among the systems to the European platform. So it is available for the other states to consult it. So this is an interesting question, but I can't make the connection yet because we haven't reached the PSW concept. But well, dangerous cargo is one thing, but there are other information such as entrance and exit time, all the information regarding the ships, sometimes interactions with colleagues that are in the SafeCNet. For example, the other day we had a wrong introduction of a ship here. And as you say, the IMO is almost the ID card of the ship. It's the only number that doesn't change during the boat life cycle. And there was a wrong introduction from one of our partners. And a little bit later, I had a text from Europe telling me, well, be careful because this IMO corresponds to a ship that is out of service yet. So there is an interaction. It's common for us to receive some notifications and for us to see what's happening, because something just doesn't seem to be right. So the platforms communicate among themselves, but we almost don't, except in the case where a small correction is needed. And from our colleagues abroad, what else? Can you ask if everyone is awake, please? Did we lose someone? In a near future, I'd like to ask you that in a near future, which of the two is going to be more important for the competitiveness of the port of Leixões? The ship client or the cargo client? Well, we could take 2 weeks to speak about this matter. First of all, wondering what's the port client? Well, if you go to this easier explanation, my client is the person who pays me, but I have lots of partners who pay for my services. So ships exist because there is cargo, because there are loads. So we mainly consider the ship as the client because he's the one who makes the connection, he's the one who pays me, but it's a very reductive way to see the client. So even today I discuss who is the client of the port. And as we see things nowadays, there's no doubt that the client is the cargo. Ships only come to ports because there is a cargo, because there is a load. If there wasn't that cargo, ships wouldn't be here doing anything. In nowadays concepts, it's an evident answer. We work for the seamlessness of the cargo, and so my client. May I? Please do not hesitate to ask questions. I sometimes bring some knowledge, and sometimes colleagues from other areas can bring some added value. So please expose us your ideas. This question and your answer clearly points to a gateway port for Leixões as a mission. But if we speak about a port such as Sines, would cargo still be the main client, or would ship and the channel be the client in this case? Well, I still say that if there wasn't enough cargo for us to have a hub, the hub wouldn't exist. And I understand the question you are asking. Being a gateway, I obviously serve, or I am very much closer, if you prefer, to a series of actors that are very important. That is our trade and our producers. So they are the people who are going to bring their products to the port, and who are going to receive goods that are going to be injected directly in the distribution chain. Of course, the business is completely different to Steams or another platform such as Alcides or Tangerman on the other side of the channel. Of course, this is an interesting question, because the business is always to load and unload boxes. Of course, some cargo will be for the interland. So we could look at my business there as loading and unloading boxes. And I'd like to illustrate something here. For 10 years, I've been doing some calculations, and it's an area that we've been elaborated here. And at the beginning, I was a bit confused about what was the number of container movements, the annual number, and the containers that are transported. These are two completely different concepts. And what is the main difference is that we are speaking about 150 millions to 650 millions. And I divide these numbers, and when they are published, it usually gives me 3.08, 4.08. When I want to put a container in a position, I've made 4 movements with it in the way it's been loaded in some place, it's been in a transshipment into an intercontinental ship that brought it to the interland or another gateway. So basically, the operation that was seen here in an operation that had a cost is nowadays seen by the port operator as a center of cost, because it operates its own ships, and this has a cost for him. And so from the moment from the operators who just were forwarders and the first movements of containers depended on that, let's see that the business of port operation is 4 times superior than the transport need, because for each container we have terminals that make 4 times more movements than what would be necessary if the ship could go to the ports by loading in one point and unloading in another. And we can see here that I can see what you mean in the concept of what I do. Of course, my business is to load and unload them for them to be able to reembark them. So making 2 movements, they aren't necessarily necessary in this case. So at what time is the coffee break? Do you want to have a little coffee, or can we move on? So I'll just introduce the new topic. Just 10 more minutes. Are we very tired? Are you good? Okay. So let's now move on a little further and go to the port. So up to now, I've been exposing things. I don't want to give you the image that everything is okay, that everything has been solved, that everything is thought through, and that there are no issues. That's not the case. Currently, we have a long way to go to be able to give substance to this politics, and some difficulties, because to have an integrated platform, there must be political will, an investment capacity. There are lots of challenges that have to be overcome on the way, and so it's not all pretty. What's our daily function, and that's what people ask me to share with you today, is to share with you what are our services here in this port. Of course, the first question within the port or within the ports is, of course, the diversity of partners. Within the ports, we have partners with private interests, as we mentioned earlier, such as the private terminals that have their own business. We have the shipping agents, the customs agents, the shippers and receivers, the operators, the service providers, the forwarders. So there's a series of actors here who go way beyond those that we can see here. It's a very vast range that are part. Well, a colleague of ours says that to dispatch a container, we need approximately 140 documents. So there's a lot of people involved, of course. We have here a series of private partners that have a dynamic of their own, and that have each their own rules and a vision of the business that public services tend not to have. So we're working in a very different way today, but the customs used to close at 5 and the port would work 24 hours a day. So there's lots of equipment, resources, human resources to give answer to the ships at any time. And we have a service that's part of the load and unload of the cargo, or the dispatching of a ship, that closed earlier. This was a problem that has been overcome here in Leixões, but it was not so long a time ago that we still had this kind of problem. So these are real problems that in some places are dealt with, but not in all. So nowadays, through systems, less than 1% of the containers who leave are not inspected. And I worked somewhere where 75% of the containers were opened and inspected before going. So they just stay there for 15-20 days, sometimes a month, just waiting to be put in the market. And the supply chain is completely corrupted, because if we go a bit ahead, there's some problems in medicines, and there's of course flaws in the fresh produce. 50% of the cargo that stands there in the port is lost eventually. So the ship goes through there. There's, of course, here great disparities that still remain. Not all of this port environment work the same way, and this can be very complex. So we have here other services such as Port Authority, the Healthy Borders, the port administration itself that also provides some services and has its own dynamic, has a public entity, the PIF, the SEF, and the local customs. So if we take any of these services, for example, the Port Authority, it had to, or I'll still put you in the situation to find the problem. So this relationship of cross communications generates some noises and some inefficiency, lots of bureaucracy, lots of difficulties and lots of inefficiency. For example, a ship can stay overnight in a port because a port authority was closed at 4:30. We can have to pay the port authority to stay open a little later, so the cost is much higher. If it's not a problem of inefficiency, it becomes a problem of cost. So all of this translates into something that is the cost. Of course, all of this inefficiency adds cost, and this is the problem. It's the diversity of the communication. If today's communication and communication sharing needs, we look at the node as a logistic interface, and we establish the connection with the ship that can receive services, that can communicate, and that can requisite some services to the port. If we add to this the road or railway node, then this connection with the platforms, the port, the systems, the train, then we're going to multiply this volume of interactions if they are not internalized or if they're not treated. And you can see here how this problem becomes even bigger. And this is the reality of the port. Here in L'Échange, we have 1,500 trucks, 1,800 trucks approximately a day that go in and go out to loading, unloading. So as you can see, there are lots of interactions that are generated here. The road asking for services to try to load, unload. So we have all the activities in a terminal, and of course a port has a complexity that from the outside we don't see them because we handle them every day, and so we know that it's very complex, and that if everyone has its own computer system and the systems do not communicate among themselves, of course it's a great problem to solve, as it's been for years. If we add to this complexity the services that these ports ask from us and that we have to answer, and we have to take into account safety, maintenance, supply, storage, diving. You can see for a ship that comes that all these interactions may occur, and it's very difficult. This is a document that I mentioned earlier that is very structured, and as I say here, it might be one of the first well-formalized steps of what has to be done as an action plan. So people call it the single window directive, the 65/2010 directive, that has to do with the facilitation of declaration formalities of a ship when you arrive, and to oblige this, to make it mandatory to have this interaction between the systems with our partners. And it approaches here, first of all, the harmonization of administrative procedures through an electronic way. So we wanted to facilitate the maritime transport using this. And so there was a time where the directives and the laws transited to state members, and these laws said that they had to use this model in a paper form that was standardized by IMO, and where all states could work on. And so 40 years ago, when I went to Europe, lots of ports already used these forms, and I had to fill them by hand. But at some point, we have to say that we have here a standardization of information that is relevant for the authorization for the ship to enter, exit, and unload. But now we have to try and make it electronically, and this was the big step. Of course, I'm speaking about our reality that wasn't very different. It must have been different in a moment in time in different ports, but we have to walk a long way to give the port this capacity to interact with the partners and have harmonized information, and to have this information valorized and have it and have a collaborative platform with a unique national platform that is guaranteed and fed by electronic ways. So the objective of the first article is that the purpose of this directive is to simplify and harmonize, and this is the first time that with this focus I am speaking about the harmonization. I mentioned the difficulty of not having harmonized systems, but harmonization is indeed a change that well, it is necessary because every port authority asked for the documents that that it thought necessary, and each ship there was documentation where we had to consult this documentation for each port to see which documentation we would have to give in each port. And so now ships can cooperate and harmonize all this information. And of course, this is a very important initiative. Then it's better than having each port asking for its own documents. And we have here a reinforcement in the article saying that each member state must accept the fulfillment of the reporting formalities in electronic format by 2015. So this was in the Portuguese experience at a given moment of political will, because none of this can go further if there is no political will to do so, and then to generate and channel the implementation space. So there was a phase in this space that was called the procedures and port electronic information. And here we tried an harmonization that was first to try and understand the level at each port was, so the state of art of each port at a given time, then try to map all the processes, and finally try to create through them a national reference. That means that each port had to have must have these documents and these delivery fluxes and circulation fluxes in the collaborative platform. So we have here a few elements. It doesn't matter. All the most simple processes: how to supply water, how to ask for the authorization to enter, how to provide services. Everything was mapped and described so as to constitute in a first phase the documental harmonization, and to later on re-engineer the processes and create a platform with these processes harmonized.
Obviously, this is our experience. Every port in Europe has its experience. A lot of cooperative platforms that have been developed, like Marni, that not only interacted with systems, it was a reporting system also. There have been a lot of initiatives that even today we cannot guide them in a way. There are interesting projects, of course, guided for pilot phase that try to co-substantiate these policies. And here we get to the port single window. The port single window. It's a port single window. And here we see one concept of working together, another of the electronic platform by the ICT technologies that implement this concept. The single platform in here you can read of Leixões, out of the three biggest national ports, Lisbon, Sines, and Leixões, that had this first, they were ahead in the startup of a common platform. The port single window is a platform. How can I put this? That co-substantiates the concept of single window. It's an electronic platform that has implemented this concept of one-stop shop that we use to take care of all our relation regarding our documentation. One of the economic agents deliver an electronic format and it flows naturally between the partners. In this platform, obviously, we could see it to be a commerce platform of business. They are exchanging relevant information, having different systems. One of our has its own system. We have our system as port activity, but our colleagues from IT and systems are in charge that the exchange systems are communicating among themselves. The concept, and then we'll have some coffee, is that then implement one-stop shops. Please here, one of the questions that I place here is a challenge that I will give you in the end to send me afterwards. In fact, to get to know what is this one-stop shop, it's to go to a place and in that point be able to solve all that complexity of information that we see behind, tries to gather all that complexity that we've seen on those crossings, that dummy that we had, and to gather it all to the platform, and so to make this fluidity of information that allows today, it sort of sells the port and it's making it competitive. The president of the come here to show cranes. Everyone knows that a crane costs $1 million, okay, €1 million, okay. But he wants to show to work some systems that we have and other ports have also, where these are arguments of competitiveness for the ports. Before the cargo gets here, it's already dispatched in order to be delivered to the market. This sells the port. This is this ensures that the delay of the cargo within the port is reduced to the minimum possible. It's a sale argument, the concept of one-stop shop between a particular economic operator and all government mechanisms. This means that for the ship to dispatch, it needs a series of entities. So my request, my permit, is sent here, and so I will have an OK or a deny OK. But between one-stop shop, between certain government mechanisms, of course, if I need for all the permits, they will return to those who are requesting them. And we will see it working in reality. And so, in fact, it constitutes this platform with the development of re-engineering of some processes and other partners that are being admitted within the platform, being a business platform also, of course, that in Portugal and in Leixões particularly, what I said before is that we are different from the rest of the Europe. We had a commission here that had all the partners from the European customs, and in fact they were very interested because the direction of our customs were accompanying us. Also, this was a way of organizing ourselves, and the Port Authority, which is a broker of information, made the investment, and that centered all this information distributing to the partners. So the information, either for economic agents and all the entities, see that they all have this This is updated, sorry. But this connection here is green. It was one of the last ones. This was already established, but this one is not, which is a central system. But locally it is. We have the assurance of this, so all the information flows on this platform. Maybe we could stop for a little bit, have some coffee, then continue speaking about the window. It's what, 10 minutes? 15 minutes. Okay, 15 minutes. At 5, okay.